All right. I've been talking about this family tree I've been working on, and I'm going to try and shoot a little video, try and explain a little bit so my daughter and my brothers can understand some of the things I've found. This, of course, is me, my wife, and my daughter. My father is William C. Applegate Jr. He was a pilot. He built Lakewood Airport. His father was William C. Applegate Sr. If you noticed, my middle name is William, and my brother is William C. Applegate III, my younger brother. I'll start off by doing the Applegate family, tracing them back. And we'll get a little of the Cook family in there as we do it because the Cooks and the Applegates are intertwined. William C. Applegate Sr., the man I often called Ding in my posts and talk, his nickname was Dingbat, and people, even his wife, called him Ding. His wife was Catherine Wardell Applegate. The Wardells are another old family, the Applegates and the Wardells and the Burges, my mother's family, have been in New Jersey since New Jersey was open to settlement. And the Wardells and the Applegates have been in America since the 1630s. William C. Applegate Sr., my grandfather, Ding, his father was Amos Applegate. Ding worked, he was a limo driver. He had a limo business driving people down from New York to the hotels in Lakewood. He also worked for Jersey Central Power and Light for many years. And I believe he even got a pension from them. He was a supervisor of some sort. His father was Amos Applegate, who was a farmer, and his occupation was listed as farmer. Amos died at the house, one of the houses on Central Avenue that I grew up in. He fell down the stairs going down to get a jug of cider in 1934 and died. He may have died at the top of the stairs. They just found the body. He may have had a heart attack. But the legend, the Applegate legend, is that he fell down the stairs getting cider. Amos did like to drink, as did Gary. These two were big drinkers. Amos's father was William C. Applegate. Now the C here isn't Conover. Like, this is William Conover, this is William Conover, my brother is William Conover. This original William C., the C is Cook, because his mother was Elizabeth Perrine Cook. Perrines are an old Jersey family, a Dutch family. We'll cover them later. And actually, they're from the island of Jersey. They're French, I believe, but they settled in New Amsterdam. And he notices the Cooks appear here too. His mother was a cook. So it was fairly common in those days to take your mother's maiden name as your middle name. If you notice, he also married a cook. His mother was Elizabeth Cook. And his wife is Elizabeth Cook. Interesting thing about Elizabeth Cook is before we're through the Applegates, we're going to spend a lot of time on Elizabeth, because Elizabeth's mother was Sarah Clayton, but her grandmother was Elizabeth Applegate. And if you trace the Applegates back from Elizabeth, it's the easiest way to get right back to the beginning of the Applegates. One name to notice here is Jacob Applegate. And this is under Elizabeth Cook's heading. But back to William C., her husband. William C.'s father was Albert Applegate. Albert was a farmer. He lived in Millstone, which Jackson Township was part of Millstone. He probably lived right there near Cokesbridge Road, where he's buried and probably spent his whole life right in that area. William was a sergeant in the Civil War, fought at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville and Gettysburg, I think the 3rd New Jersey. He's my great great grandfather. These are my great great grandparents. Of my great great grandparents, they all fought this. Well, they didn't all, but they almost all fought in the Civil War. William C. Applegate was a sergeant, fought in, like I said, in the 1863 campaigns. Jacob Castler, Amos's father-in-law, was a private in the New Jersey Infantry. Charles Wardell was a sergeant in New Jersey Cavalry. Israel Hoffmeyer was a son of a German immigrant. I'm not sure that Israel fought, but he was a sailor. It's quite possible he was in the Merchant Marine or at sea, and that's why he wasn't drafted. He was a ship captain later in life. Johnny Burge was a private in the infantry. James K. Radford. Radford was an English immigrant. He came over here as a citizen of England, yet he enlisted and fought in the Union Army. John J. Compton did not fight in the war. He tried to enlist, but he had lost an eye as a child, and he was not considered fit for duty because he was blind in one eye. Francis Veering was a 16-year-old drummer boy in the infantry and fought in the war even though he was in his young teens, mid-teens. His father, also Francis Veering, was a 40-year-old private in that same unit. He brought his son to war with him. Interesting about William Applegate is his father-in-law, Daniel Applegate Cook, a generation before him, son of Elizabeth Applegate and Joseph Cook. Elizabeth Cook's father. He died at Fredericksburg of his wounds from the Battle of Fredericksburg. So son-in-law and father-in-law both fought in the war. Father-in-law died. So you can see the Civil War had a big effect on everybody in America. All right, back to William. Albert essentially couldn't read or write. I found legal documents that said he made his mark, and it explains that he cannot read or write. I believe his wife may have been able to read or write a little bit, Elizabeth Perrine Cook. But because he couldn't read or write, his Applegate Trail ends right here. There's not any record of him, besides a few land deals he did with the Cooks for farmland. I've surmised that because William Applegate appears over and over in the family in Albert's line after him, that he was the grandson of William Applegate, born in 1759, 1835. And William's most likely son to be Albert's father would be John Warner Applegate, but I'm guessing here. It's possible Albert was an illegitimate son of Elizabeth or one of the other Applegates. That his record ends, but I do believe he was the grandson of William Applegate because of the William becomes a fairly common name. And if he was the grandson of William, he was the great-grandson of Jacob. The line ends there because we're going to look at the whole Applegate line through Elizabeth Cook. So that's my paternal line, really ending here, but probably goes back to Jacob and beyond. We'll look at Jacob again right now. Elizabeth Cook, who married William Cook Applegate, was Amos's mother, Ding's grandmother, my father's great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. Elizabeth was the son of Daniel Applegate Cook and Sarah Clayton. Clayton is a very old New Jersey, Ocean County, Monmouth County name as well. Everybody knows Clayton Gravel Pit and Concrete Works, originally in Lakewood, but now it's all over the state. And I've traced them back to England too, and it's the same Clayton family as Doug and Billy, who run the gravel works. And they are my great-great-great. They are from the same family as my great-great-great-grandmother. Daniel Applegate Cook, as I said, died of wounds received at the Battle of Fredericksburg. His mother was Elizabeth Applegate. His father was Joseph Cook. And since we're doing the Applegates right now, we're going to work through Elizabeth. Elizabeth was born in 1779. Her father was Daniel Applegate. Daniel Applegate was married to Elizabeth Parent. He was born in 1759. Daniel fought in the American Revolution. His father was Jacob Applegate. That's the same Jacob that was William. So Daniel is a brother to William Applegate, who I believe is Albert Applegate, my great-great-great-grandfather's own grandfather. So I believe he's the nephew. Albert Applegate is the nephew of Daniel Applegate. That's this Jacob Applegate. Jacob Applegate, 1723 to 1818. He also fought in the American Revolution. He fought at the Battle of Toms River. If you notice, he was married to an Irons. The Irons are a very old Ocean County name. Trace them back later. We'll do that family later. We're staying with the Applegates right now. His father was Bartholomew. Bartholomew was born in 1687 in Middletown Township, which was pretty much all of Shrewsbury, Monmouth County at the time. That's where the Applegates had settled, coming from New England to Gravesend, New York. And when the British threw the Dutch out of New Amsterdam and opened up New Jersey, they came across to New Jersey, the second generation in America. Bartholomew in 1687 was born in New Jersey. He wasn't from New England. He's a local guy, and he died in New Jersey, probably Toms River. Tom didn't quite exist yet, but Middletown, Toms River could have been considered part of Middletown at the time. Bartholomew's wife, by the way, was Mary Esther, who was the famous Lenni Lenape that gives us our Indian heritage. She was a half-breed. Her mother was Waku Tsunami, who married a Swede down in New Sweden, which had been conquered by the Dutch and then turned over to the English when the English beat the Dutch. Bright Lightning was a full-blood Lenape. Her daughter was half-blood. The story goes that Bartholomew was delivering a load of potatoes down in South Jersey somewhere, and he rode through a Lenni Lenape village, and he saw this Indian girl, and he bargained for her and sort of bought her and married her, and all these Applegates afterwards, down to me, carry Indian blood because of her. She was half Swedish, though. She may have very well been striking. He may have noticed her because she may have had blonde hair. She was half Swedish. Her grandfather was a fairly well-known historical chief called Big Thunder. And her great-grandfather was another historical Lenni Lenape are not terribly historical. They're not really famous, but the Delaware he's noted in history. You can find him, and his father is noted too, Setawanake Mani, who actually died out in Indian Territory and not in Ohio or Indiana out there later. But he's a historical Lenape too. Then the line fades into the mystery of that. But going with the Applegates, that's Bartholomew, 1687. He's the son of Daniel, 1662 to 1710. The original Bartholomew in America was born in England in 1620. He died in New Jersey in the having come with his father from England to New England to Gravesend, Brooklyn to New Jersey after that. His father never made it to New Jersey, but he established the farm. He was married to Hannah Patrick. We'll look at her later. So that's Daniel's father, Bartholomew, Bartholomew's grandfather, Bartholomew. The name Bartholomew is a traditional Applegate name. The first Applegate in America is Thomas Applegate. He was born in 1604 in England, in Norfolk. That's where the Applegate home is. That's where the Applegate, they were landowners. There was a manor, Applegate Manor, and it's in Norfolk. And he was born there, and he died in Long Island. He'd come to Massachusetts, the Bay Colony. He'd lived there for a little while in the 1630s. He had a ferry, which was essentially a canoe or a rowboat that he crossed Charles River, one of the rivers, with. There was an accident where the ferry had sunk, overturned, and a man had drowned. And Thomas thought it best to get out of town eventually. Unlike the Wardells, who were also in New England at the time and were Quakers and were having problems with the government, Thomas was just sort of a ne'er-do-well. He didn't be because of any great religious or philosophical difference with the Puritans. He just had an urge to move, and him and his son, Bartholomew, came to Long Island, and Thomas died there, but Bartholomew went on to New Jersey. Thomas's father was John Perrine Applegate. Notice Perrine. I'm not sure why that name appears there, but the Perrines were a English family. They weren't from Norfolk, and they do show up in New Jersey, but this is 1580. John Perrine never came to America. The Puritans they were 40 years away from settling in Massachusetts. His father was William Applegate, 1534. Now these people lived at Applegate Manor in Norfolk, northeast of London. If you think of England if you reverse this little picture here, make it look the other way, Norfolk is northeast of London. It's right where the shoulder would be. If he was looking the other way, it's over here. And that's where the Applegates had settled a long time ago. His father was Sir William Applegate. They were minor landowners. They had a coat of arms. They were men at arms. They were required they could carry a sword and kill you if it called for it. His father was William Nicholas, and notice his name is sometimes Appleyard. Again, Norfolk, England. His father was Nicholas Appleyard. Now, they're all Appleyards now. After 1450 or 1425, it's not Applegate, it's Appleyard. And I'll show you why in a little while. Again, they all lived in the same place, same town. His father was William. His father was Sir Bartholomew. Again, they were men at arms. They weren't minor nobility. They weren't royalty or anything, but they were allowed. They were They had a name, they had a title, they had land. They weren't serfs. That's 1335. His father was Sir Nicholas Appleyard, 1305. We're getting back towards just after the Norman conquest. Nicholas' father was Richard D. Applegard. This is Norman. This is a Norman way of looking at it. It's not Appleyard anymore, it's Applegard. He was born about 1220. His father was also Richard. And his father was also Richard. His father was William, 1191. His father was also William. And his father, we don't know his first name, but his name was Appleyard. That's definitely Norman, that's definitely French. There is a famous Appleyard, it's not this guy. The dates don't match. But there is a famous Appleyard who was a religious philosopher and teacher. I'm guessing he was probably related in some way. He was a cousin or something. This guy, 1142, he died, so he probably didn't come over much after William and the conquest after Hastings. Maybe his father or his grandfather had fought with William against Harold. But that's the oldest Applegate, and it's Appleyard. All right, and that's the Applegates. Going back almost to the Battle of Hastings, through John, the last one in England, to Thomas, the first one in America, to Jacob, who may be my grandfather through Alfred, and also my grandfather through Elizabeth Cook. I may have two branches of the family descended from them. I want to show you one more thing before I leave the Applegates. Comptons. My mother's line, Marjorie Burge, her mother was Mildred Compton. Her grandfather was Harry Compton. His father was John Compton. His father was John Compton. His father was Job Compton. His father was Cornelius Compton. His father was Cornelius Compton. And his mother, Cornelius Sr.'s wife, was Elizabeth Applegate. This Elizabeth Applegate was the daughter of Thomas Applegate, the same one that had the ferry that killed the man. She was brothers with the Bartholomew, the one that had been born in England and came with his father Thomas to America. She was born here. She oh, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Thomas was brothers with Bartholomew. He was born here. She was the granddaughter of the Thomas that came from England. This Thomas's father is the Thomas Applegate we just saw, that was John Perrine Applegate's son that had come to America, had the ferry. His father is the one that had the ferry. Of course, that makes my father and my mother ninth cousins, which is not unusual when you do this thing, but William C. Applegate and Marjorie Burge can both be traced back to the Applegates. And that's the Applegate line. Next, Burgess.